So, good morning. I've got an interesting slide here. I'm also on the SFIA Council, and I'm on the BCS Council and the BCS Academy for Computing Board. But I've come from the IT training world and spent 18 years at Sun Microsystems, ended up running the training business at Sun in a very commercial environment. And now I've come into the academic world, but not as an academic. So I'm sort of sitting on the fence between the two worlds we've just heard about. So I'm just going to go through very briefly some of the things that I've looked at, but focus very much on a case study where we've tried to take a real-world business issue that's been addressed through using SFIA, which I hope will be a useful example. So just to start off with, the world needs IT people. The IT and telecoms professional is the driving force of the world. We need to get really good at developing IT professionals, whether it's through undergraduate programs, master's programs, commercial training. This is the hot issue. We've got to produce the right people with the right skills. So we have to understand how to convert the business needs into something that is deliverable, whether it be through academic education, whether it be through commercial education. We need to understand how to break down some of these issues so that we can actually provide the skills that are needed. So to go back to where we started this morning with Alan, people are the centre of everything, and it's really important to have SFIA to enable HR activities. So the whole concept of human resource management is enabled completely through SFIA. So I think Alan's outlined that very clearly earlier on. And the only tool that I've come across to actually understand the people issues is SFIA, because we can break things down and actually provide all of the aspects that somebody needs within a human resource function. So this came straight out of the OU textbook from the MBA programme about managing human resources. These are the things we need to focus on when we're developing people. But in formal education, the key thing we've got to do is understand what are the skills requirements of industry. As Susan's just talked about, to plan an appropriate curriculum. How do we integrate that into the workplace so that we actually have workplace learning that's relevant and practical and providing the right experience? And then how do we provide and support entry into and progression through the IT world? And I think that's that word progression that I've always been interested in. Once you've got people into the industry, you need to keep them developing. You need to keep people moving through. And there was a diagram that David Clark, the Chief Executive of BCS, put up at an EU eSkills conference about 3 years ago. He said, wouldn't it be fantastic if we could take somebody who was a coder or a data centre operator and provide a pathway that gave them a vision to becoming a CIO or a CEO? How would we do that? What's that curve look like? So that's really behind a lot of what I've been looking at the university here, is how could we help provide that type of pathway for people? Well, the starting point was to map our curriculum to SFIA, and this is basically the diagram that Ron showed earlier, but we've tuned it a bit by using the government IT profession role descriptions, and we've broken each of these roles down into their respective level. So if we take something like a business analyst that spans levels 4, 5, 6 and into 7, to actually be able to use this in a curriculum way, we actually have to break this down into what is a business analyst at level 4, what's a business analyst at level 5, and map that across to the curriculum. So it's a handy guide to actually identifying the right curriculum within the university context that can develop some of these broad skills that people need in the industry. And this has been a very interesting exercise because it's actually showed that there is a strong link between SFIA and the curriculum. But it's always important to make sure you've got the application that Susan was talking about. Without that application, it is just academic learning. You've actually got to be able to put this into practice. But this has really guided us in understanding how SFIA can support development through an organisation on a long-term basis. And obviously for the Open University that's important because most of our students are in the workplace and they are looking to develop their careers. So this has become quite a useful tool for our students. So I just want to go on to a case study briefly. We've seen a number of things about levels 1, 2 and 3, and Andy was talking about level 4. The last little while I've been looking at level 7. How do we actually address an issue that comes up regularly? And there's actually an issue that's been raised both by the CIO of the university and a number of other organisations. How do you develop a CIO? That's a real business issue. People are currently bringing CIOs into their organisation from other disciplines, from other organisations. What they're not doing is developing their own CIOs. So how do you develop your own future leaders? What can skills frameworks do to support that? And how can we develop the right competencies? And I just picked a random selection of news clippings to say, actually, we don't even know what a CIO is. There isn't a standard descriptor. And actually, if you go to the government IT framework, the government IT profession, there's this big roof on the house that just says CIO board level, head of profession. And when you actually go into the description, the description's fairly light. It just says the head of the IT function in an organisation. They do corporate governance, architecture, organisational design, and stakeholder relationship management. That's it. That's a CIO. And yeah, that is an element of a CIO. It's a good starting point, but there is more to it than that. But let's go down the SFIA theme a little bit. So let's look at level 7. And following the good practice that Sheila's taught us all, look at the level descriptor. And, okay, what does it say about autonomy, influence, complexity, business skills? Well, quite a lot. Now start picking out the verbs, exactly as Andy was talking about. And what that gives us is the really key attributes of a level 7 person. It is about a decision maker, an influencer, strategic relationships. Well, these are now concepts that I take across to our business school and they say, yeah, we can develop people that look like this. Interestingly, at level 7, there's only one thing here that is really about technology, and that's about explaining it, presenting complex technical ideas to technical and non-technical audiences. It's about communication and understanding technology and translating it and explaining it to others. Most of the rest is actually classic business school territory. So now we go to level 7 in the framework. And no, you don't need to read all of the lines here. But let's look at the focus of this. Well, the skills are saying that a CIO level person would be doing things like governance, information management, business strategy, program, project and stakeholder management, a little bit of systems design, development, service management at a high level, and supplier quality and audit management. So these are the key themes that would appear in a CIO role. So a totally different view on this is been doing some work with the CIO Executive Council, and they interviewed 25,000 CIOs around the world. And I said, well, actually, what's important about a CIO to you? And to begin with, I thought this had nothing to do with SFIA. They said, actually, there's 3 types of CIO. There's a functional head who is technology orientated. They run an IT organisation. They're really about running an effective, reliable service. And about half the CIOs, or 43% of the CIOs, are in that type of role. There's a transformational CIO, which is about partnerships and creating change opportunities and optimising processes. And then there's a real strategist CIO who looks at strategy, competitive advantage. How do we relate this to SFIA? But this sort of makes quite a lot of sense. So go into it a little bit further, and actually it's about functional, is about service, about systems, about an internal view. Transformational is about partners, processes, and looking at the enterprise. And then the business strategist is about peer relationships in the industry, business expertise, and an external view of the world. And alongside that, you end up with a set of competencies. And these competencies are the things that need to be developed as you go up through the levels of being a CIO. So what it's now saying is there's probably 3 different role descriptions for a CIO. There's one for a technologist type CIO, one for a transformational CIO, and one for a business strategist CIO. Now we're starting to break down that very sort of rough description that was available. But it's all driven by competencies, business competencies. This is the left-hand side of Alan's diagram earlier. This is the other complementary things that sit alongside SFIA. The other thing that the CIO Council's got is this pathway, which just looks very much like the vision that David Clark spelt out, where using these competencies you can develop from a functional expert in a data centre down here, where your functional expertise is most of what you do. As you move up, you develop different competencies, and then hopefully one day you might get to the board. And what does the board person need to know about? Well, market knowledge, customer focus, and commercial orientation. So those are key attributes for a CIO. But actually, the two do overlay. So if you take the SFIA diagram, what we're talking about with the levels as you go up, the levels of responsibility, actually matches moving across the levels in SFIA. And a lot of the other aspects support the skills as you go down through the framework. So, bringing it all together, we start getting a better description of what a CIO might be. As quite interesting, it really maps quite well to what Alan was saying earlier. You've got the professional competencies that you can take from the SFIA framework. The only one that I've sort of questioned is whether an enterprise architect really does live in there, because it's in the government description, but actually I'm not sure architecture lives that way, certainly the way it's described at the moment. But you do need to put alongside it the behavioural competencies. And there's an underpinning knowledge that it's assumed that you're coming in with into this role. But it's actually saying that level 7, there's a core set of SFIA skills, but actually the development programme should be about developing the other aspects, the behavioural competencies. So you do get to a point where actually the correct learning approach isn't about the technical skills, it isn't about SFIA skills, it's actually you reach a point where the behavioural competencies are the things that you need to develop. And at the CIO level, at level 7, that's really the key driver. So what it's enabled us to do is now start building qualifications, and this one's coming from the business school. Because actually, at level 7, we're dealing with a business curriculum. And this is going to become a new entry point into our MBA programme. But it's based entirely upon that role description of a CIO, so that we can actually see that you can reach certain levels, and now you can move into continuing development. Even at level 7, you can still develop people. So thank you, and I hope that gives you a nice compliment, but it sort of really works very well alongside what we've already heard this morning. So thank you very much.